Does solar provide a net energy gain? Interesting question. Study done last year by Ferroni and Hopkirk for solar systems in Germany and Switzerland found that after you build the solar cells, put them in panels, construct them on the site and maintain them, and then you figure out how much energy, this analysis is called energy received over energy invested, I should say. The energy invested turns out to be bigger than the energy received. You only get 82% of the energy out that you put in. And I've translated this to North America. That 35-degree north latitude line is the break-even point. Anything north of there doesn't get as much energy out as you put in.
All right, this is Ripley. What made you choose Ripley?
Well, we chose Ripley because of a couple of reasons. First of all, Chautauqua County has a long history of renewable energy development. So there have been wind farm developments here in the county, and so it's just got a history of being generally supportive of renewable energy development. The second is its physical location close to high voltage transmission lines. So if you look out the backyard, there's a high voltage transmission line that's running out there, and so we're building effectively a solar powered power plant, and so we need to connect that to the electric grid, and so that was the second main reason why we chose this area. And then the third was more general about versus Ripley and the broader New York presence. We've chosen New York because of the strong state-level policy support for renewable energy development. We were asked to send out notices about our project to Pennsylvania because our project borders up right against the state line. But we have not received any feedback from them about this project, so we don't have any, I couldn't answer that, and I don't know how they feel about the project.
The size of the project?
The size of the project as targeted is 270 megawatts, and could be less than that depending on how the ultimate project shakes out, but that's the overall goal.
And the footprint?
The footprint is potentially 2,000 acres of actual use area. The box that you'll see on our public involvement plan is much larger because that's our study area, and we're just giving ourselves the flexibility to potentially site the project anywhere within that box.
How many landowners are signed up?
That's confidential, but we're currently in the process of acquiring the land that's required to build this project. To date, we've acquired about 2/3 of the property that we believe is required to build the project, and we're going to continue doing land acquisition activities for the next, probably 6 months or so. And at that point, the die will be cast, and we'll go forward with further, more detailed design based on the land that we get signed up. We've done a lot of work on the ground in the project area, trying to assess the slopes, trying to assess the current condition of the property so that we can lay out a solar facility that will be both cost-effective and productive.
And what is on this land presently?
Generally speaking, the land inside the project area is a combination of farmland, pasture land, and wooded property.
Is there any grape vineyards?
That's a great question. We have if we have some, it's just a tiny bit up in the far northwest portion. There are very few grape vineyards in this property, in our target project area, if any.
So if you say 2/3 of the land is committed, can you give me an approximate? Are we talking 10 people, 20, 30?
Well, the overall number of landowners within the project area is probably under 50. So I actually don't know the exact number of specific landowners that we've gotten signed up for the project today.
And it changes daily?
It does. It does.
If you commit to this, will you be looking for a pilot payment in lieu of taxes?
In general, projects like this will engage with the local industrial development agency as well as the local taxing authorities around some sort of property tax agreement that allows us to manage the property tax exposure for the project over the long term. And generally speaking, the goal of those arrangements is to try to create a predictable property tax payment both for the project as well as for the host communities.
Do you think that's fair to give you a full break when you're a big industry coming into a small town?
I think that what we seek to do with any tax arrangement that we have with a local community is to try to create a deal that is fair for both the company that's making the private investment as well as the community that's receiving that investment. Because in general, we're making an additional investment in the community that's going to be a net positive benefit to that community. And so by virtue of this investment, we're going to be putting potentially $200 to $300 million worth of capital investment into the community, and that will be a net positive to the community. And so our goal with those arrangements with the local taxing authorities is to make sure it's a good deal for both sides.
There are a number of people here that feel that it will be a net negative, economically and environmentally, because their property values will be impacted.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question, please?
A number of people in this area, including cattle farmers, feel that there will be a net negative economic impact and a net negative environmental impact, and they're concerned for their health due to the chemicals that are involved in solar panels.
Yeah, I can't. I've not heard that commentary at all, so I can't comment on that.
Do you know?
There's a question I'm happy to answer.
Do you know if property values will be improved or not improved by your project?
With regards to the impact of the project on property values, we'll be required as part of the Article 10 state permitting process to do a study of the impacts of the project on a number of different factors, including the built environment, flora, fauna, economic impact. So that will be incorporated into our overall economic impact analysis.
What happens to the land when it's covered with solar panels?
I'm sorry, could you ask the question again?
What happens to the land when it's covered with solar panels and there's no sun reaching the earth?
What happens to the... I'm a little confused by the question.
It's like putting a tarpaulin made of toxic plastics over the entire farmland.
I'm not sure what the question is, to be honest. I'm sorry.
You are blocking the sun with solar panels.
Well, what we're talking about when we put a solar project in the ground, right, is a project that has, you're basically taking the use that's existing there currently and you're converting it to a solar use. So that's exactly what you're talking about doing. And every individual with whom we have a contractual relationship is, a private landowner that has agreed to, use that property for that purpose. And so, we, as a private company, we have no ability to condemn property for any purpose. So every individual that's participated in this project has done so through a voluntary interaction with us, and they've chosen to take that existing use and convert it to a different use. And so instead of farming hay, they have chosen to farm the sun with that particular piece of property.
In general, how long do you keep a project before you sell it?
In general, Connectgen is a developer of utility-scale wind, solar, and battery storage projects. We build those projects with the intention that we're going to develop them, build them, own them, and operate them for the long term.
How many do you operate?
We are about to start operations on our first 3 solar projects in California, Arizona, and Nevada. We have 3 projects that are currently under construction in those states, and those will likely go operational by the end of this year. So starting January 1st, 2020, we'll have 3 projects in operation.
From the way the earth is formed and where the sun hits it, that anything above the 35th parallel gets much less sun, especially in the winter. Our studies show that you can't break even in terms of the energy expended to build them versus the energy you will produce above the 35th parallel.
Is there a question? I'm sorry.
The question is, why are you building it above the 35th parallel when you're at the 42nd parallel and the sun here is insufficient to make enough energy to pay for the production of the project?
I mean, our view is that we wouldn't be here if we didn't think that this was an economically effective project. So we've done our own analysis. You may have done yours. So our view is that we have the necessary resource and the cost structure to make this an effective project.
But isn't that in terms of subsidies and nothing else?
What's the question, please?
The question is, the subsidies are sufficient to make a profit for you, but is the energy produced worthwhile for the community, for the state of New York?
Our view is that projects like this are a win-win for the communities in which we operate, for the private investors that are putting their capital at work, and for the state public policy goals that have incented this development. So we're here because the state of New York has said we think it's a valuable public policy purpose to incent renewable energy development. And so we're responding to that state policy initiative, and that's part of why we're here in New York. And part of why we're here in this community is because we have a community that has historically been supportive of renewable energy development in the past. And we're here because we like to partner with communities that want us here. And to date, we've had a favorable reaction from the individuals with whom we've interacted about this project. So,
could you describe the energy policy of the governor of New York?
I couldn't speak for the governor of New York. Sorry.
You just said it's positive from your perspective. How do the incentives in New York compare with incentives in other states for solar?
The incentives in New York are generally more favorable than some other states around the country. So, compared to Texas, for example, right? Texas has its own state energy policy. New York has its own state energy policy. California has its policy, Arizona, and so forth. So, but in general, I think places like New York have made a positive statement about their desire to have solar energy development here, wind energy development here, and battery storage development here, and we're responding to that policy framework.
And have you done an analysis of the amount of sun that you're going to receive per, how much wattage you're going to get per square foot, or however they measure it? Have you done an analysis of what kind of sun you get here? Western New York is cloudy, snowy.
To answer your question, we have absolutely done an analysis of the potential energy production of this facility. And as I mentioned before, I think we believe that it is potentially economically viable here. We're continuing to study this, right, as we move our project forward. We're in early days of the development of this project. But our view is that this is a project that is economic to build based on the solar resource that's available here today. We are intending to build a project with the nameplate capacity, meaning the rated capacity of the facility, that is 270 megawatts.
What do you say to the EIA's statement that when you claim 270 megawatts, it's really 27 megawatts in this region at the 42nd parallel?
So when you build a facility that is dependent on a generation source, like the sun or like the wind, it's also the same case, by the way, with a natural gas-fired facility or a nuclear facility, for example. There will always be a capacity factor associated with those facilities. So even a natural gas-fired facility, for example, will not always be producing at its full nameplate rated capacity. A solar plant is no different. A wind plant is no different. A hydro facility is no different. And so our facility, there will be times of the day when it is absolutely producing 200, if it's built to its full size, when it will absolutely be producing 270 megawatts. There will be times of the day, like the night, for example, when it's producing 0, and then there will be other times of the day when it's producing sometime in between that. So at the summer, at its peak output, when it's the sunniest, it's highly likely it will produce 270 megawatts. On a winter day like today, when it's cloudy, it will be producing something less than that, for sure. With regards to the layout and the design of the project, those decisions have not yet been made, given the early stage of development of the project. It's likely that within the next 18 months, we'll make a decision about what tracking technology we choose to use for the facility and whether or not to use tracking. There's two different technologies that are available to us today, as you probably are aware from your own research, because it sounds like you've done a lot of research. There's a fixed tilt technology, which is simply the panels are fixed at a specific angle, and there's tracking technology, which uses a small servo motor to move the panels to track the sun. We've not yet made the decision here about whether we will track or be fixed tilt. So,
how will you get rid of the snow?
On a tracking system, the tilting of the panels allows the snow to slough off. On a fixed system, we'll rely on nature to slough off the snow.
And dust and dirt?
Same thing. It's nature. Even in a place like Arizona, where, for example, we're building a solar facility today, if you were to go out there today, you would look at the panels and say, wow, it's quite dusty. But as it happens, the panels are, our economic analysis and the production estimate takes into account the fact that the panels will have a certain amount of soiling on a regular basis.
The materials that the panels are made, and where are they made, by the way?
So as I mentioned before, we're at very early stages of development for this project, so we've not yet made a decision about equipment supply for the project. So I can't tell you today where the panels that will ultimately be deployed at this project, where those panels will be made.
And decommissioning, what will the decommissioning plan be?
We'll be required as part of the statewide Article 10 permitting process to prepare a decommissioning plan for the project that accounts for the project's decommissioning at the end of its useful life. The facilities today are designed for a useful life of at least 30 years. At the end of that process, we'll have to decommission the facility pursuant to our plan, which generally speaking involves removing the project infrastructure and either recycling it or disposing of it.
What do you say to the claims that it costs 5 times as much for the electricity produced by solar than any other fossil fuel,
With regards to the cost of solar and the cost of energy that comes from a solar plant, all I can do is suggest that people go and do their own research. There's been a recent study by Lazard, for example, which comes out every year about the cost of energy from solar. Solar technology is improving in terms of its competitiveness on an unsubsidized basis, but it's not there yet, and we're not going to pretend that it is. So I can't speak to your specific claim about this multiple or that multiple. All I can tell you is that the solar efficiency continues to improve to the point where it is becoming increasingly competitive as a source of unsubsidized energy.
And power density, when you're talking 2,000 acres, possibly, versus the 200 acres that we had for our gas-powered plant that made 487 megawatts. Your footprint is very much larger and produces very much less. How do you justify that?
When it comes to project footprint for any kind of generation, I think we have to look at the issue holistically. So you may be able to cram more megawatts into a smaller footprint for a natural gas fire facility, but you're also getting, you're also emitting pollutants from that facility and creating other waste products from that facility and using water from that facility, for example, which we're not going to use at our facility. So it's just a question of trade-offs and how one wants to use land to generate electricity. And what we're trying to do is, put land to work at the request of private landowners that want to use their property for this purpose. And so I tend to not try to compare different sources of energy based on density. I just think about what are the overall policy goals we're trying to achieve, and do we want to use those same, maybe we are using more land per megawatt, but we're also not using any water, we're not emitting any carbon sources, and we think that's a good trade-off.
But that's once it's here. How do you justify the vast destruction of places in China that make the solar panels?
Yeah, I can't speak to what's happening in China with regards to manufacturing of solar panels. I don't have enough information about that. I'm sorry.
Thank you very much. We're done.
It's my pleasure.
Yep.